West Hill United is a progressive spiritual community where how you live is more important than what you believe. West Hill United is a people, a place, an idea. We are a community living out of a progressive faith, striving to make a positive difference in our own lives, the lives of others, and the world. Join us Sundays at 10:30 a.m. or connect with us at any time.
I've been working with a colleague, Kay Glennon, over the last while, working on a resource project that would put together resources that can be used by other leaders and other communities across wherever, as far as people are interested in them. Kay is in Wisconsin, I believe, because I thought she was in California when we started the project, but learned later that no, she's not in California. And Scott and I met her and her partner in Portland, Oregon, when I was speaking there some years ago. So what she uses right now, we use in the United Church, many clergy use the lectionary, and that is a 3-year cycle of readings from the Bible that are chosen by a group of esteemed colleagues and professors and put together in that lectionary. It's reviewed from time to time, but the cycle of the lectionary brings forward the major themes of the Bible over the course of 3 years. So for many years, I worked on a project trying to come up with non-biblical themes out of those biblical readings so that people who were required to continue to use scripture readings in their services would be able to pick something up and go, oh, that'll be easier, and use it. And I continued on that project. I think I went through 2 cycles of the lectionary, which is 6 years, before I realized that I was never going to get through it. And then Kay and I had this conversation. So Kay is in the United Church of Christ, and she actually is in a bit of a splinter congregation. The congregation that she had been in decided that leadership that represented sexuality, non-binary sexuality, was not welcome, and so she is now leading another community which gather together regularly, but she uses the resource that comes from the United Church of Christ. And so that's what I've been looking at for the last couple of weeks as I've began this process, because it is so much easier. It's just 12 months, and each month has a theme. They've put it through 3 years, but you're just given a theme for the month. And then you can do whatever you want. You don't have to worry about the readings. You can pick what you want. You can pull it together. And so that has been a joy to start working with that kind of a resource. So last week, I talked the theme for this month, which because we've started at the beginning of the cycle, is actually it's not Easter because I'm using her cycle now. So we're not in the season of Easter, so I'm just using one of the themes. And the theme for this month is trust and integrity. So last week, I talked about character and conscience, which was sort of came out of that theme. And today I'm going to talk about integrity. And the readings that I had shared last week were the ones that were going to be read today, and they probably could have because they focused on integrity. But I would have had to really stretch my brain to get them into the service today. So what does it mean to have integrity? The origin of the word is about 1400. I always go to the etymology to begin with, trying to figure out what it meant. And the words, it came from the Old French and directly from a Latin integritatem, which is about innocence, blamelessness, chastity, purity, soundness, wholeness, completeness, all of those kinds of things. We think of something having integrity means it's like of a piece, right? It's like solid, it's not going to fall apart, it's there, right? It's one thing, whole and undivided. And then when we speak about maintaining our integrity, we're speaking about being true to our original selves. We want to hold on to that person that we identify ourselves as. We want to be true to ourselves and not waver away from who it is that we think that we are. John O'Donohue, who was one of the people who I had a quote that was going to be read, John Donahue, was a phenomenal writer and wrote within the Christian context in a very mystical kind of way. His books are incredibly moving. Beauty, the one about the meaning of beauty, I think is the one from which I had taken this particular quote. But he writes of each of us as being on a journey to become fully ourselves, right? So each person is on a journey to become fully itself as a person. So that process of integrity then shifts a little bit over time as we become that person more fully. So I want to go now and shift to the idea of culture and what the impact of culture is on our integrity. And of course, back to another definition, culture is attitudes, values, goals, practices that characterize a particular place. It could be the culture of a section of Toronto, which has taken on a particular ethnic variety, or it could be the United Church of Canada has its own culture. It could be a soccer team, whatever. They have their own culture, right? So an institution or a group of people who have their culture. And it's the set of values and conventions and social practices that organization has, right? The culture that evolves in that organization. And you know, when you work in a large organization, sometimes that culture seems to be utterly impersonal. Sometimes managers take pains to make it personal and real and engaging, but the culture of the organization itself is generally pretty set and can be tweaked in an individual place. But so there. But in a multicultural world, it's hard for us to get our heads around what would have been meant by culture when that word first emerged, right? When we first started thinking about cultures, the cultures in which we were steeped were singular, right? We live in a multicultural world where we have become aggregates of all kinds of different cultural elements. And it's hard for us to imagine how deeply ingrained culture has been in the past. Remember to put a table up here. I was reading a book recently called The Thousand Autumns of Jacob de Zoet. Does anyone know that book? It's by David Mitchell. It's a book about the Dutch in Japan in the 18th century, the late 18th century, when they were there to extract resources and make trade with Japan happen. And the cultural norms there are so pervasive and so powerful that the characters in the story who are indigenous to that land are almost afraid to think outside the box. Like they would never act outside the box, but thinking outside the box is controversial for them for inside. Like they are so torn if they have to do that. And in fact, some of the social things that the cultural stuff required was so brutally graphic in the book that it was hard to read it, and I actually didn't finish the book. If I get into a book that has too much really difficult graphic violent stuff, I don't read it. So I had to step aside. So culture outlines the way that we think. It's the standards of how we think together, and it impacts integrity because culture is constantly smashing our integrity into pieces, right? And it takes our integrity and it breaks it down, right? So that we have to be a different person in every different place. So the culture, and I want you to think about this, okay? Think what the cultural rules and expectations were in your grade 6 gym class. What was the culture there? How were you expected to behave? Could you be true to yourself? Did you have to hide who you were in some way or another? Think about your first party where alcohol was present. What was the cultural pressure happening in that space? I know, Scott, you didn't have it till you were like, I don't know, still hasn't been at a party with. You've been at parties with alcohol, but that there's a cultural pressure there when you're young and you're in that space and everybody else is having a drink and getting bombed and having a good time, and or some kind of chemical drug that would be used now. Think about the culture in your doctor's waiting room. What are the expectations there? How are you supposed to interact? Do you keep your head down? Do you look? Do you have to read a magazine? Do you want to touch those magazines? What is it going to be? It's different from how you are when you're with a group of people out having dinner. You act differently. Think about your adult child's home. How free do you feel to be yourself in your adult child's home? Is there an expectation there that you will hive off portions of yourself in order to be comfortable and welcomed? You might be uncomfortable, but to feel welcomed in a way that is non-judgmental and all those things that you want to do with your adult children's home. Each place we are has a specific culture to it. And as we move from one to another, we assume the cultural requirements of that space. And so that's why I think of culture as constantly attacking our integrity, because it requires that we split up into different ways of being. The third thing I want to talk about is belonging. From childhood, we learn how to belong in those different areas. To assess the context we're in and to find a way to fit into it, so that if we choose to do so. I mean, often I chose not to do that. Didn't go very well usually, but many of us don't. And so the cultural context that you're in is something that we learn to glide into and out of, based on what it is and what is required of us. We simply learn to glide, right? It's not like you're going in the door and you think, okay, got to put this on now. It's just, it happens automatically that you go in there and you seek belonging. That's what we yearn for. We seek belonging as children, as young adults, as seniors. We want to belong. We want to find a group that we feel comfortable in, and if we go into a group we've never been at before, we quickly look for the different cues and figure out how we want to be in that group. Whether it's a new class we're taking, whether it is our adult child's home, whether it is, a shopping experience, where we want to fit in, we want to belong. And so we change the way we are. We benefit from the security and the privileges of belonging once we figured it out, right? People, you're part of the group. Your people are comfortable with you if you know the rules and how you're supposed to be. And we act one way with our friends, one way with our teachers, one way with our parents, one way with our kids, one way with, like on and on and on. In essence, and I use this term all the time, we lob off whole portions of ourselves to be palatable in any particular situation. We lob off our intelligence. We lob off our emotions. We lob off our curiosity. We lob off or attempt to lob off our prejudices. We lob off whole portions of ourselves when we try to fit into a space, and we spend our lives doing that. And as we do that, we disorient ourselves from ourselves. We become disoriented from the integrity of ourselves. And we become, in that process, not that one thing, that whole, that integrated self. We lose our integrity as we do that. So I called this perspective, "What now?" Because there's always another situation that you have to fit into. And honestly, trying to do it can be a challenge. I know as we get older, we get better at it, but it's really, that deer in the headlight look that you get from someone who's like, what the hell is going on? And they don't know, okay, but we have become accustomed to that lobbing off of ourselves, and we know how we're supposed to belong, and through therapy we can find some of those pieces that we've lost and put them back together. It's long and it's expensive, and I don't know if it makes any difference because you still lob that stuff off when you go in that same room or that same family or whatever. It's still gone, right? So how do we deal with this constant evolutionary what now? Like, what do I need to put on now? What do I need to lob off now? It's like this evolutionary need to fit in, which I think it is. Like, I think that evolution, our evolution, allowed us to find ways to fit in, to survive, to be part of the group, to shut up if whatever we were going to say was going to put us at risk, right? So evolution has allowed us to learn how to put on those different masks and lob off those parts of ourselves. So who are we? And how do we bring those pieces back together? So I want you to take a moment and pretend you're on a beach. A beach, and you have a basket, and you're picking up pebbles or shells, one or the other. And I want you to think about the variety of different places that you engage with others or with a system or with a culture that is different or distinct from another one. And I want you to pick up a little pebble and put it in your basket, or a shell and put it in your basket for each one of those that you can think of in the next minute or so, right? So think about your family of origin, pebble. 3 pebbles, maybe. I don't know, but pebble. Think about your friends from growing up. How would you be with them? Think about the people you worked with or work with. I'm going to let you now roll with that, and I want you to pick up a pebble for as many distinct groups as you can think of and put them in your basket. Okay. If you're willing, tell me about how many pebbles you put in your basket. 2 or 3? 15? 30? More? Well, 1? More? Yeah. Okay. So the reality of that is you're all those different people, right? So what does integrity mean in that sense, then? Where is your integrity in that? One of the other words that comes out of the root of integrity is integrate. The work of bringing things into a whole. The work of taking disparate elements of ourselves or whatever our work is or whatever it is we're trying to do and bring it into a whole. So where is your integrity? It's the basket. The basket is your integrity. All those pieces are you. Finding a way to survive in this world requires disparate yous, disparate ways for you to be with different people in different contexts with different requirements. And that basket is your integrity, because you need to honor every single person you are able to be in that world in which you live. But I'm going to take you back to last week and talk about character, because that's what the basket is made of. That's your character. Your character allows you to be all those things. And as I said last week, it can grow and change. Your character can develop. We work hard at it in this place. as you work hard at it at home, you've worked with your families, you've worked with your children, you've worked with your communities to establish and strengthen that character in a positive way. That basket is your character, and every interaction that you have, every pebble that you have, is held by who you truly are and what it is you bring to those relationships, almost all of which, I'm sure, are to create beauty, peace, goodness, truth, and calm the waters of family. That's what happens. John O'Donohue said the integrity of beauty is that inner straining toward goodness and completion. That inner straining when we are trying to accommodate, when we're trying to be present, when we're trying to be whole, when we're trying to be ourselves. That all of that comes together into what he calls beauty, right? And that basket is that thing of beauty that helps us bring all of that together. And Martha Beck, who the other quote was from, says, of all the strategies and skills I've ever learned, the ones that actually work are those that help people see where they've abandoned their own deep sense of truth and followed some other set of directives. And that can be a confusing thing, but if you see it as a pebble that you can bring into your basket, even when you are not being who you thought you were, if you can find a reason that you weren't, that fits in that basket, in that character, it was important for me not to hurt that person. It was important for me to have that experience. It was important for me to learn that lesson. Then it fits in that basket and it deepens your character. So I'll leave you with that. The focus moment, of course, was about our recognizing that we come into the world whole, we bring our children into the world whole, and then we expect them to live a life of pebbles, interacting in so many different ways. And they do so beautifully because we have evolved the strength to do so. Thank you.
Become a sustaining champion of West Hill United's work by committing to an automatic monthly donation. Learn more or donate now through Canada Helps.